idea of the dimensions of your students, because certainly those questions allow your student to talk about the extracurricular activities they're really engaged in, what they're interested in as a person, things that might have been something they've overcome or dealt with while they've been in high school. Those are all things your students can share in the essays. I've encouraged students to really talk about things that they believe will help me make a favorable admission decision. So that's the thing that I hope they focus on, is answering the question and favorable decision information, not shock. Shock just makes me concerned, and I call your counselors. This just breaks down for the evaluative process how things kind of shake out in terms of what we're looking for. Wanted to make sure I covered that guidance counselors and teacher recommendations help to reinforce what we see in your student's application. So I shouldn't see something drastically different. Counselor and teacher are writing glowing recommendations. Student has horrible courses, grades, isn't attending class, and the essays are terrible. That doesn't make sense. So they should really in some ways match. They don't have to align completely. So it doesn't mean that the counselor has a love fest with your student, but certainly they're not saying things that would lead me to believe that, gosh, this student has some academic issues. That's important to recognize. For our review process, as I've talked about, we read applications really in multiple times. So all of our applications are read twice. You'll find that most institutions, they may be read at least once, and there may be an additional person that makes the decision. All of our apps are read at least twice, so this year we received just under 50,000 applications. A third of the apps were read twice. The rest of the applications went on for a third review. I actually read all the applications a third time for the Birmingham area and also for our College of Literature, Science, and Arts, which receives over 20,000 apps. So, yeah, a little busy. So we recommend in the evaluative process that you encourage your students to be succinct with their essays, give us good information that will help us make favorable decisions, but recognize that we have the ability to review the application several times. Not every college and university does this. So it's really important that you talk to the institution to find out, how do you evaluate applications? Is it one person, one read, they make the decision? Is it a committee? How do they really determine who they admit to their class? As I've talked about really the evaluative process, we've already covered it, and this just gives you really spelled out what I talked about. Educational environment is your high school, so it's really talking about what is available to you, not a perfect high school, not a universal high school, but Groves High School. So I'm placing in context everything I've talked about tonight, specifically in the context of Groves. So I'm looking at what's really available to your individual students in this high school. And certainly that's important to recognize. We talked about essays. I'm looking for information, not necessarily whether or not your student enjoys or doesn't enjoy using commas correctly. So that's important to recognize. Our faculty have told us they can work with any student who has ideas. A student with no ideas really is a student they're not looking for. So as it relates to our process, we're looking for their ideas. So it's important to recognize as they express themselves in the application, that's what's most important. Not necessarily that it has the right form. So that's important to recognize as well. Though that Michigan essay with Michigan down the middle and they lined it up on the paper, not very impressive. Usually it doesn't work itself out and it gets misaligned and it's just not a good idea. Also, often students will try to write the essay to a specific college or university, forget the specific university. It comes to all of us. It says whatever college or university. It's not ours. We're not impressed. And, you know, unfortunately, it just makes us sad. So leave colleges off of your essay because inevitably what happens is at the end, that school isn't the one where you hit the button to make sure you sent that essay. So I encourage you not to put at the end, and that's why whatever the school is my first choice. It usually doesn't happen, then you send it to the right school. Personal background, certainly we look at that information. For the University of Michigan, I wanted to point out alumni ties. We have the largest living alumni population in the world with over 500,000. That is wonderful, but that also makes it very difficult for alumni ties to be the thing that makes the decision. It also becomes something that I know people focus on. Well, there are a lot of students who have alumni ties that attend the University of Michigan. Yes, 500,000 people in the world have alumni ties to the university. That doesn't mean that was one of the most important factors in the decision-making process. Really, that other information, courses, course selection, trend in academic performance, all very important in the evaluative process. Certainly, we value relationships with our alums, but we also recognize that their students do great work and they're going to be interested in Michigan. It tells us more about the likelihood that they will enroll at the university. So as I'm making decisions from our wait list, alumni ties does become important. More important out of state than in state. And that's because, again, with students who are further distance from the campus, we're really trying to determine likelihood of enrollment. In-state, if a student is admitted, we're about 80% sure they're going to enroll. So we have a much better idea of whether or not they're going to enroll on the campus, simply because they've applied and been offered admission if they live in the state of Michigan than if they live out of state. It's about 22% for students who don't live in Michigan. And the further distance from campus, the less likely they will enroll. So that's why alumni ties becomes important. We also look for information about families where the student is the first in their family to attend college. Certainly something very important to the university. Very small proportion of our population, less than 12% of our total student body. So many colleges and universities will talk about having initiatives around particular areas of interest. Military service, those entering the military, so our ROTC students, certainly those receiving scholarships for ROTC. All of those things are important to us. Students who may have faculty ties, so our faculty students, certainly are important, but it doesn't make the decision. It's just a consideration factor. Certainly those things I've talked about the academic preparation are important. What you'll find is that particular institutions value these things more or less, and so you'll find that some private institutions certainly do value faculty ties more, may value alumni ties more in their process, so keep those things in mind as you're looking at particular institutions. Geographic, certainly, we do take that into consideration. Students who live in the state of Michigan, that is the #1 priority that we have in terms of enrollment. So that is important. And our students who live in-state but don't live close to us, so our students in the Upper Peninsula, certainly are very important to us because they are the least likely to enroll and cross that bridge and come down. So we do take that into consideration as we evaluate applications. But we also don't have caps or quotas. So I don't in any given year know throughout the year how many students have applied or been admitted from Groves High School until the end of the year when we do receive status reports for all of our high schools so that we're better informed about what happened. The other information we've talked about, extracurricular activities, extenuating circumstances, anything that's happened in your life you want to share that you believe will help an institution make a favorable decision. So I just give that caveat, sharing information you believe will help make a favorable decision. We've talked about recommendation letters. Counselors talk about how you've changed over 4 years, developed as a person. Your teacher will talk about academic preparedness, motivation, and potential in that subject area. So if you're interested in engineering, a math or science teacher, very helpful. Any other academic area, any academic teacher. But an academic, core academic, math, English, science, social science, and foreign language teacher. Once you've been admitted, congratulations. Enjoy it, visit the college campus, and start making enrollment decisions. The information provided are websites that can be helpful, including our own university website. Certainly we know that this process will continue to change. I encourage you as you start to think about the process, at the end of the junior year, visit the websites of the particular colleges and universities your student is interested in. Often things change from year to year. So what happened this last cycle and what families may share with you about this year could change. The Common App is a great example. Students who applied last year, it didn't work so well. This year, they've cleaned up the technology. It's working well, very well. So again, in any given year, something that one family encountered may not be what's going on the next year. Institutions actually receive goals on a yearly basis from their president and their boards, so they may have very different initiatives, whether it's scholarships, size of their freshman class, that all can impact what happens with your students. So making sure you check in with those institutions just prior to your students applying, very helpful in informing the behavior of what happens with your students in the application sometimes. There's also another page of just helpful books. So I encourage you to take a look at them. But that is my presentation for the evening. So I also wanted to, I don't know how much time we have, but I do know we wanted to open up for questions. Any questions I can answer for you? Yes?
Okay, with regard to the GPA
Yes.
and the weighting of certain classes, do they look at the overall